So it's a protective mechanism. So if we can repeatedly give exposure to certain tendons, say the Achilles tendon, to a certain amount of force. So say before, this initiation or inhibition initiates at 100 newtons of force, right? Well, if we repeatedly expose those tendons on a box jump, say, to something about 200 newtons of force, over time, okay, this inhibition will maybe only initiate at a little bit of a higher level, allowing you to produce more force in that resulting push-off. Does that make sense? So we can see this is a big way to kind of almost trick the body to letting us produce more force, because it's always protective. Number one goal of the human body is to survive, so it's always going to undershoot a little bit. When I first heard this, still was kind of confused, but this example cleared it all up for me. Think of a bow and arrow. We can all agree that pull the arrow back this far, or pull the string of the bow back that far, the arrow will go a certain distance. We can pull it back further, it'll shoot even further. But if we pull back too much, what's going to happen? The bow's going to break. Okay? Well, luckily, our tendons, they're able to enhance their ability to handle drawing the bow back further, if that makes any sense. So, with our better functioning of the CNS here, we're able to draw the bow back further. The adaptation to the inhibitory reflex, the bow can handle more stress. So you can see how those two things together can help us produce more force, jump higher, run faster. Okay, I talked earlier about jump training versus plyometrics. So Verkhoshansky called what he called shock training, and this is what I call true plyometrics. Okay, remember there must be a strong and rapid eccentric contraction that precedes a concentric contraction. So we're talking jumping off a box, getting a huge shock to the system that causes that stretch reflex. You can see this guy is crazy here. He's jumping probably 4 feet. In the video, this is actually here. He's going to jump down, get that huge shock so that he can jump over the hurdle more effectively. I think I already talked about this. The key here is that rapid transition between eccentric and concentric phase. So it's really 3 isometric. So we could necessarily be doing depth jumps, but if your athlete is coming down and he's way too long at the bottom, he's not being fast, it's not necessarily a true plyometric. If we're doing tuck jumps, right, if he's jumping, standing on the ground for way too long, it's not necessarily a tuck jump. According to Verkhoshansky's rules, it must be faster than 0.15 seconds. All right, but keep in mind he was using some of the most elite athletes in the world, so assume it could be a little bit less. Remember, it doesn't have to necessarily be that, but to fit his description of true plyometrics or shock training, that's how fast it is. But it always should be maximum. If you want to read into this, or I'm sorry, this is a video, you can look this up on YouTube. Dr. Yessis goes into it, probably explains it a lot better than me. So look at that when you get home. Again, examples of depth jumps, tuck jumps, reactive box jumps, and bounding. If you're not sure what some of these are, we're going to have one of our interns come up here towards the end and demonstrate some of these. So if it's not a true plyometric, well, what is it? Call it jump training, right? There's no massive shock involved, although there is some stretch reflex involved. It's not a huge shock to the body. You're not really using gravity to kind of accelerate the concentric part of the jump. It's anything that's a little bit slower. There's too much time between the eccentric and concentric phases. Force is lost a little bit. It can't be transferred as effectively. I always tell my kids it should still be maximal effort. If we're doing a box jump or a vertical jump, it's got to be fast. Otherwise, if it's less than 80% of effort, it's a waste of time. Okay, same thing with speed. So not that it's not developing something, but just don't be fooled into thinking it's actually developing power development. They work great as a beginning progression towards true plyometrics. So think of the training age, the curve that we have there. People on the beginning end might have a high number of these in their workouts. Great as a warm-up, gradually increase intensity for more intense plyos. Again, teaching tool for novice athletes. Examples of these would be box jump, vertical jump, broad jump, any sub-maximal hopping and skipping. And again, I'll show you some of those a little bit later. Training considerations, all right, I've heard a lot of different things on this, but training age, all right, are advanced plyos necessary? Again, beginners, maybe not. You get an all-American, 5th-year athlete, there might be a need for more advanced plyos, so keep that in mind. As for strength levels, I've heard some things where, you know, they got to be able to squat twice their body weight and all these things before they start plyos. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, to be honest, I might have some kids that never be able to squat twice their body weight. So the question is, do you never program plyos for them? So that's why that one's kind of a hard sell for me. So my rationale is, there's no exact strength levels required, although you should have some basic strength. All right, you don't want kids coming in day one, can't even squat the bar, doing a lot of plyo. To me, I've found that eccentric strength in the legs and within the hips seem to be a limiting factor. You know, if they can't stabilize their hips and they're landing and they're getting that cave in, all right, they're probably not ready for plyos. Remember, they experience 3 to 4 times their body weight of force in landing off the box. So we got to get them close to that. But how many people do you know can squat 4 times their body weight? Okay. Mobility can be an issue if they can't dorsiflex properly. It can lead to some micro trauma issues, maybe injury. So it all just use good judgment. All right, if it looks sketchy, it's probably sketchy. All right. Can they land safely? All right, so can they avoid their knees caving in? Can they keep a nice athletic posture when they land? Did their back come over? All right. If you're not sure, well, how do they squat? All right, look at their squat. If they're under the bar and they're looking like this, all right, probably, and it's not a lot of weight, they're probably not going to be able to land pretty good and not be ready for the higher level plyometrics. So I kind of by the jump down before you can jump up rule. Take a small box, and I've even done it to where just have them walk off the Olympic platform, so maybe 4 inches. Start there. It's very simple. See if they can land with their knees out, good athletic posture, and just build them up. See how high they can go. If they're having trouble jumping off a 12 or maybe even an 8-inch box, well, then you can tell that they're not going to be ready for tuck jumps and things of that nature. So let's keep them towards more of the jump training dependent. Make sure the kids understand the concept. I think this is big. I think a lot of people just try to go in and get the work in and get it done. But it's not about necessarily what you do all the time, but it's how you do it. So if the kids don't understand that each rep has to be maximum, whether you're sprinting or jumping, if it's not all out, honestly, again, under 80% effort, it's a waste of time. Flooring, okay, make sure it's not too hard or too soft. If it's too hard, over time it can lead to injury. If it's too soft, you're going to kind of lose some of that stretch reflex that we're, and that energy that we're trying to utilize. Found that turf works really well. Even some of the field turf, but we're lucky enough to have the turf in here. And even some of your Olympic lifting platforms. I'll show you an exercise later where they jump from the rubber parts, and I think that works pretty well. As for implementation, I don't want to give you a ton of guidelines because you can go and read the resources that I've given you to do this. So I'll just kind of skip over that. Just want to tell you the different ways how to implement it. All right, you can do this a million different ways. You can do it in a dynamic warm-up, in a block of a period of time where that's all you're doing, what I call a plyometric block, or what I've started to do recently, complex training. So if you want to do it as a form of dynamic warm-up, it's great when you're under limited times. All right, coach doesn't give you a lot of time with your athletes. You can build up from general dynamic flex exercises and use a progression that finishes in tuck jumps or bounding or whatever it is. Benefits of this enhances, if you do it before, say, your weight training session, you're going to have an increase in any speed or strength work that might follow. If you do it before practice, sure is a proper warm-up. A lot of times coaches need help developing the warm-up, so give them a great warm-up, and it's a way to get plyos throughout the annual plan, especially in season. And then before a game, all right, a lot of my pre-game warm-ups that I'll do will start very simple and end up in plyos and sprint and kind of prepare the central nervous system competition. When I was at South Florida, just the way the schedule was, this is what I did. I used a 15 to 20 minute or so block of training to focus solely on power development and plyos. So it's a great choice. You have the time and the space. The upside, it's great for teaching large groups of athletes. You can line 4 or 5 guys up. You can do things on the whistle, so you can coach more than one person at one time effectively. You can kind of have them all in your field of vision. Fatigue from strength work is not a factor yet because they should be fresh. And there's some argument that it's more effective by limiting exposure to a single type of training. So athletes can focus on one thing. It's being fast off the ground, being explosive. You don't have to worry about anything else. Downside, takes a long time. 20 minutes, if you only have a 50-minute session, which some cases you do, or an hour, I mean, that's almost a quarter of the time developed solely to that, so that might be an issue. And then long rest periods. Back on that one slide, I was showing some of the rest periods you need, sometimes up to 3 minutes. All right. Well, I find it hard to just have kids stand around for 3 minutes. I've done in the summer. I'll do speed work, have to rest a minute, and that feels like forever. I get all antsy, so that's one of the downsides of that. But I guess you could always throw in your torso work or some mobility work in between your sets to kind of keep them busy and keep the session moving. Recently, I moved to the complex method, also known as the stimulating method. It's basically combining 2 exercises so that the result of them is better than each one by themselves. I did a paper on this in grad school. After the research was so all over the place, I was totally against it. I was like, I'll never do that, but I've totally changed my mind on that, and I'll tell you why. Usually we use a strength exercise, usually low reps, so usually a squat, usually about 90% or higher, maybe even down to 80, 85, as long as the volume is low, paired with a jump, or we might do something like a bench press paired with a medicine ball, chest pass, or a plyo push-up. Again, 5 reps or less, and 1 to 2 reps of the strength exercise from the research seems to be optimal. Make sure you don't have any grind out reps, meaning those reps are super slow, because there's going to be too much fatigue involved there. All right, so keep the reps low and the speed somewhat fast for the strength portion of it. The movements must be biomechanically similar, but different in speed of execution. So we can see that having one RM squat is going to be a lot slower, but look very similar to the jump. If that makes any sense. Utilizes post-activation potentiation, or PAP. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but I highlighted it, so if you haven't, you can look into it a little bit more. And basically, it's just a heightened level of excitement of the central nervous system after either a jump or a sprint, or in this case, a lift. So it leads to better training effect, and over the long term, better adaptation. Upside to this is very time efficient. This is why I went to it. Here we have about an hour. I found I can get a lot of work, get what I call training density, a lot of work done in a short period of time. Keeps athletes on track. All right. If you want them to stand around for 3 minutes, all of a sudden they start talking about the weekend, start talking about classes, that, the other thing. All right, and that really annoys me. So this keeps them on track for the whole session. And again, that enhanced training effect from combining the two. Personally found, I'll show you why, that it's actually helped me. The downside is that it's based on the fitness fatigue model, meaning at any one point your fitness and fatigue are kind of in this interwoven kind of play back and forth. All right, and the thing that I didn't like about it originally is that the optimal recovery time for when it's optimal to wait to do the plyometric is different for everyone. Everyone in this room is going to have a different time which is optimal, and this is back when I was kind of young and just thinking, well, it's not optimal, I'm not doing it, right? Well, remember, optimal is great, but let's look at how we can still use it, and even though it's not optimal, it can still be beneficial. All right, this model, this is one model that I found on fitness fatigue, gives you 2 windows of opportunity, window 1 and window 2. And what we're looking at here, this is that fitness, or the heightened level of the CNS activity after, say, a 1 RM squat, or a 90% squat, something of that nature. All right, well, you also get some sort of fatigue from that lift. All right, and it's maximized at a certain point, but then it also decays. So if we look at the first window, and this is the complex training, it's going to be immediately after that set. All right, and the graph is kind of hard to tell, but the excitement of the central nervous system is going to kind of outpace the fatigue during that window. So that's a great time to say, hey, finish your set, go to the turf, get your tuck jumps in, raw jumps, whatever it is. All right, and then the one that I haven't really found a use for this, but after a lot of high volume maximal contractions, an example would be multiple sets of isometric contraction with 40-second rest. All right, obviously that's going to build up a lot of fatigue, but if you wait several minutes, there's going to be a point where, again, that fatigue, the rate of decay of fatigue is going to outpace the excitement of the nervous system. There's another window of opportunity. So I guess it depends on what best fits your situation. Again, this is the one I found. Maybe in the private sector, you would have more time. There's other things you can do in here, and maybe you can mention that. So I was looking for that a little bit more. Again, like I said, not an exact science. Research is all over the place. I'll let you guys read this. It depends on all these different things. A lot of different things can affect it. My personal experience, I've yet to see a negative to training this way. And actually, I've seen positives. In my opinion, the worst case, nothing positive comes out of it, right? Nothing negative, but nothing positive. So with all those things about being time efficient, keeping the kids on track, I think it's a good route to go with. Since I've been here, before I started implementing this, and literally it's only been the spring, and I mean the complex method. Men's soccer, we had only 4 guys with broad jumps over 100 inches, and now I think we have 11. Okay. Now we do have some new personnel, things like that. Some people graduated, so how much of that plays into it, can't really tell. But from what I can tell now, I haven't seen anything. Progressions. All right, so most of my progressions come from the special strength training manual for coaches from chapter 2, so I highlighted that. That's something you should definitely check into. Keeping in mind, a lot of times we look at a ply, I'll say, all right, jump over this box. Is that going to be very advanced or very novice? All right, my initial reaction, well, it's very dangerous for jumping over a box. Someone could fall and get hurt. All right? Remember, Marc Hickok characterizes them by the power output in the takeoff, not by if someone's going to fall and get hurt. All right, so keep that in mind, because that might be a consideration depending on your population. But if we're training with more advanced athletes, it's the intensity of the training stimulus, or how much power output happens in that takeoff is how we classify it, or how he does. So just go over these real quick. Note that single and multiple takeoff jumps without a forward displacement are not shown here. So they would be right here on this end. So example is just a vertical jump or a split squat jump or anything like that. Very low on the intensity scale here. Starts without overload, right? Makes sense. It's like in the weight room, you got to handle your body weight. Starts with jumps with forward displacement. Okay, so jumps over hurdles, over boxes, any sort of bounding, or even stadium jumps or jumping upstairs. All right, and then it moves to jumps without forward displacement, meaning standing jumps. So repetitive vertical jumps or repetitive box jumps. All right, when I first looked at this, I was kind of confused, and I kind of thought of that. Wow, that looks pretty more advanced than that. But if we're looking at the power output, it makes sense. The other ones are more vertical, so there's going to be more effective gravity bringing you down, so it's going to cause you to have to use more power to return up to the box or whatnot. So keep these in mind. Multi-year development. I think Frank's going to talk a little bit about that later in his presentation. Make sure you progress as far as you can safely and effectively, right? And then revisit it next time around, right? We're looking at a year-long thing here. We're starting with single stadium jumps. Right? We have freshmen coming in. Well, maybe we progress to the multiple jumps without the forward displacement, so reactive box jumps. All right, and then all of a sudden the season comes up, or the summer comes up, and we got to take not necessarily some time off, but we can't progress the way we want. We'll just kind of keep your notes, see where you left off. Next year, start all over, but now just revisit each one slightly less. All right, and this is where the multi-year development model comes in. Freshmen might come in a new class. Well, maybe they're back to doing this for a different length of time than the older guys. All right, that's how we can finally progress up to the ultimate, which is depth jumping, things of that nature, or even jumps with overload. To be totally honest, I was at South Florida almost 3 years. I've only gotten to this level, okay, one time with one guy. He's a 3-time All-American goalie. So try to get through it as far as you can, but it's not a good idea just to jump to this level. Just like the weight training, if they can't handle down here, they're going to have a tough time with it. They're just not ready. So just keep that in mind. As for the annual plan, just like strength training, go general to specific. It creates a logical plan for athletes, gives the body time to adapt accordingly and avoid plateaus. So real quick, some guidelines. In the general phase of the early off-season, focus on body position, landing mechanics. Make sure we develop eccentric strength. Okay, that's the big one that we talked about. So let's incorporate eccentrics and isometrics at the same time into your strength training. Give you a total better training effect if you use those at the same time. It won't really confuse the body. it'll kind of focus everything on, one thing. Focus on jump training. Remember the jump training exercises? Okay, rather than the highly reactive plyos, prepare the nervous system and the tissues using a little bit lower impact. I've also changed my thoughts on this. I actually use unilateral plyos. So again, jumping off one foot seems to be a little bit more difficult. Again, a weaker athlete or a new athlete, that might not be the best option, but if they're able to handle their body weight, they're strong enough. Because the speed of execution is actually slower off a single leg jump than it is a bilateral jump. So we're talking, hey, the theory of specificity, getting closer to the season. Well, let's try to mimic the speed of execution of sporting movements by doing 2-leg jumps. Okay, in the past I've usually done it in the reverse order, but I've changed that a little bit. Same thing for plyos for the upper body or total body. The med ball tosses, I used to progress up in weight. Getting closer to the season, now I've kind of changed my philosophy to progress down in weight. If we got a 20-pound med ball, it's going to move at a certain speed, all right? But as you decrease the weight of the med ball, the speed is going to be faster. So if you're a baseball player or a lacrosse player or anyone that has to move your upper body fast, right, that'll more mimic that. And then during this time, give an equal balance of vertical, horizontal, and lateral exercises. Right? Keep the body low. How am I doing? Specific phase. So this is the late off season. So summertime, men's soccer, they'll be coming back in August. Let's start tailoring these plyos towards the demands of the sport. All right, it's basketball, start focusing a little bit more on vertical stuff. Again, don't cut the other stuff out, just change the amount that you use. Hockey, more horizontal and lateral, another example. Let's focus on the speed of execution. Again, this is where we start using bilateral stuff and start using more true reactive plyometrics, like the multi-jumps, repetitive jumps, bounding, box jumps, and eventually hopefully dead jumps, things like that. And then let's increase the volume, all right? It kind of goes against the inverse relationship of the intensity and volume, because plyos they should always be of high intensity. So at some point, we got to ramp up that volume to get some more adaptation as they get a little bit better. Obviously, right before competition, you want to drop it so it's not too much. During the competition phase, this is a tricky time. I like this quote. I heard Mike Boyle say it, but I think he might have stole it from someone else. It says, in the off season, give them what they do. In the in season, give them what they don't do. Makes sense. Volleyball player. In season, you're going to do a lot of jumping. All right, so find out the best time to program a lot of jumping. But in the off season, that's what we want to enhance. If that makes sense. Example, that same goalie I was talking about earlier came to me. And this is the middle of the spring season, so it wasn't even his true competition season. He was like, Coach, I need to get better at jumping. I already had like a 40-some-odd inch vertical. And I was like, okay. He's like, well, I want to do plyos 2-3 days a week. So I was like, oh, that's great. This guy wants to come in on his own. I can get to some of this higher level stuff. So what I did is I went out to practice. And I watched him in practice, and I counted how many times as a goalie he did a jump and land. And it was over 200 times in one practice. All right, so I looked at that, and I'm like, does this kid really need to do a lot more jumping right now? And as much as I would love to do it, I just couldn't do it. I told him, like, look, this is how much you're jumping. It's probably overkill, so we've got to keep things like that in mind. All right, so during this period of time where he's not in the goal, well, then we can ramp that up a little bit, but if not, use it accordingly. If you attend practice, try to get in once a week. It's very tough because a lot of their sport-specific speed and plyos come from the sport itself, but not always. So check out the practice, see if it's happening. If not, try to use that time during the dynamic flex to tell the coach, hey, or can I come out, warm the kids up, and sneak it in that way. It's a good way to do it. Remember, just don't overuse it in season. Think multi-year development will save the body for future training. This is the part I really believe in, effectively coaching. All the stuff we talked about does not matter if you can't convey the information or get people to buy into it. So it all comes down to the training session. You have all this knowledge, right now how do you apply it? One thing is you must clearly explain to the athlete. You got to be precise and demand their attention. That's one of those where it's like, guys, eyes on me. If you're not listening, you might as well leave. It's not going to help you. You got to explain to them the importance of being fast off the ground. One thing I use is the quote of, I think it was Charlie Francis who said, if you're on the ground, you're not moving forward. So I mean, you're slow. So when I'm saying get off the ground fast or push the floor, that kind of gets their attention. Oh, I don't want to be not moving forward. So kind of highlight that. Emphasize on the quality of movement and effort. And then a big thing, you got to be able to perform them yourself. If I go to jump off a box and I say, oh, you want to jump down? Don't let your knees cave in, and my knees cave in, or whatever. If it doesn't, I don't look like I can do it myself, it's going to be really hard to get those kids to buy in. So practice them yourself, maybe implement them in your training to help you out with that. Some other techniques I found really effective, maximizing that effort, things like a broad jump mat. We have 2 of them over there, it's nice, you can either do that, or put a tape on the ground, and tell the kids, hey, this is your best, 100 inches. I usually put like a little pencil, a little marker down there, just to jump past that. I think it helps really visualize and tell them, you know, kind of forces them to give that good effort. Things like the just jump mat, which we have, same thing, it'll tell ground contact time, things like that, your vertical jump height. So this summer I started programming and kind of set it up so the guys will go over and they'll get a couple jumps in and they'll give instant feedback on how high they're jumping. A little competition built in there. If you just have them stand here and jump, not that they're not giving complete full effort, we don't really know, that'll give them a little feedback. Another good thing is targets to touch. You guys turn around real quick. We started right above the EC3D display. You see those targets up there with different heights. I got that idea, well, I had it for a while, and I saw a video, I think the University of Missouri kind of had something like that, so it's something I haven't actually implemented quite yet, we're just putting it together, but having those different heights and knowing we're, you know, having different jumps, 1-hand touch, 2-hand touch. For soccer, I'm probably going to have them jump up, touch your headers, things like that. So we know what their max is and be like, all right, well today we need 12 jumps at above 80% of that. Remember, anything below that's a waste. So go get it and kind of, you know, build some competitions and things like that to try to get the guys to jump higher. So that's really effective. Keep in mind today, so far I only talked about, we're almost done, we're just going to do some demonstration. Only talked about lower body plyos because that's what everyone kind of naturally thinks of. But don't forget about the upper body and torso. Things like med ball tosses, so chest passes, slams, plyo push-up progressions, things like that. And then torso work. All right. Instead of just going over all those, because I'm sure you guys all use things like that. Get some ideas. This is a great book by Dr. Yessis. Has tons of that information in there. Again, today I just wanted to give you kind of some of the knowledge behind it, maybe how to implement it, but you go to here to look at those exercises that you might use. Ian, come up. We put the biceps away. All right. So what we're gonna do is real quick, with about 5 minutes. Right? So we're just gonna go over some things. So when we talked about the landings, if you can't see, we're gonna have them up on this box. But when you're coaching landings, some things you want to do. So if you get up on the box, all right, I'll have them do one this way and one facing the other way. So remember, we want them to come down. I don't like to use the word absorb the landings, all right? Because when you absorb it, show us absorbing the landing where you're going to crash down and be, okay? Right there, you did a pretty good job of absorbing the force, right? But we need him to jump back up. That's not a good thing. I like to use harnessing. So what I'm going to tell the athletes is I want you to be soft and firm. Meaning I want you to jump off the box. I don't want to hear a big foot stomp. So be soft, but be firm, meaning anticipate that ground coming, stick and stop on a dime. So we know that we can harness that energy when we move to the more advanced plyo. So let's try an example of that. Good, not too bad. Good, and you want to show the other one? Notice his torso position is pretty good. He's upright. He's not bent all the way over, so bent all the way over. If they're crashing down like that and he needs to jump back up again, all right, that's going to overload those spinal erectors and not be very effective. So we want to coach him through that. So let's go to our jump training. All right, when we do jump training, let's do a box jump. I think you can jump on a 60-inch box. So.